underclassmen. So we have a little bit of information here for our underclassmen and our seniors and even our college families, current college families. So as a part of your planning, right, before your student applies to any college, and I say you need to do this as soon as now. If you have an 8th grader, right, do this now. You need to know their projected chances of receiving financial aid and how to increase their aid eligibility before you apply to any college. A lot of families do not have that talk, right? That conversation with their students. So the student is, hyped up, excited. They're applying to all these colleges and coming to find out they're applying to some schools that mom and dad just don't have the budget for and no desire to actually pay for. And you hate to put your student in that situation. Have that talk, have that conversation. Understand today. I tell all my families, if you watch any of my YouTube videos, if you ever talk to me one-on-one, one of the first things that I tell people to do, if college were to begin tomorrow, right? If it were to start tomorrow, what are you going to be expected to pay, right? That is a very, very important question to get an answer to. What am I expected to pay based on my current situation and the financial aid formula, algorithms? What am I expected to pay? And is there anything that I can do to reduce that amount, right? Based on my situation, what am I expected to pay? And what can we do? This is going to help you with budgeting, with setting certain targets or goals, right? This is also going to help you when it comes to financial aid appeals. And I'll talk more about appeals in the next couple of slides, but understand this as soon as you can. Even if your student is currently in college, you need to make sure you are paying or receiving the right amount. Okay, we do not want to overpay for college. So as we go through some of these slides here, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about, this is a, if you can see my screen, hopefully you can see it okay. I know it's kind of light, but this is a form that we provide pretty much all our families, most of our families that we do a consultation with, and a lot of our clients do this. We update it on a regular basis. But the idea here is we have a form that we kind of send out to our families, a link. Again, if you want this link and this information, I'll email it to you and you can fill this out. But what we're asking for here is we're asking for some financial information. This is almost like a preliminary FAFSA, right? Or you're like a rough draft, I would say. So we're going to ask some of the same information that is going to be required when you complete the forms. And the reason why this is important, and this is our process, but maybe you have a different process, is because it gives you a good understanding of where you stand before you get too far into the process, right? So when it comes to FAFSA, the form for the most part is pretty self-explanatory, pretty simple. However, what you want to do when it comes to FAFSA is the planning. You want to plan to receive financial aid. Completing the FAFSA, the form for the most part is straightforward. It's pretty simple. But the planning that goes into maximizing your students' aid potential is where a lot of families miss the mark. Think of it a little bit like planning for taxes. This is tax season right now, depending on when you're listening to or watching this particular recording or here live. And a lot of times, if you have a complex tax situation, you do the planning before you just file your taxes, right? You want to minimize how much your tax liability is going to be. And that's where planning comes into play, very similar to the FAFSA. Now, there's no guarantees that your student is going to get financial aid or any type of money, but you still want to make sure you're putting your best foot forward. There are a lot of affluent families that still can qualify for need-based financial aid. Do not leave that to chance because you are basing this off of what happened with your neighbor or your sister or what you may have heard based on your situation. Now, you could be right, but you never know. I've come across every year, at least I would say 8 or 9 families that make well over $250,000 of household income that still can qualify for need-based financial aid. And depending on your occupation, you may have a greater chance. So don't leave that to chance. Make sure you are doing your proper due diligence. And it's all about your situation, school selection, things like that, that can dictate your students' ability to receive financial aid. But it's important to go through the process before you complete the forms and before you get too far in the process. So when we have our families complete these forms, as you see on my screen here, we ask for, a lot of information. Tell us about the student, how many people are in a household, GPA or test score if you have one. What is household income? Does the student work? What is their income? Any savings for college? We get down all the way to, asking about, your small business if you have one, if you own a farm, maybe some insurance, everything that would be essential, right, when it comes to aid eligibility. And we take that information, we process it, and then we come up with some projections, right? And the projections, usually come out in the form of a report. So the first report, or the first page of, and this is an example report, will kind of, start talking to you about, the situation that you're currently in at the university that you might be considering. So in here you see section 1 through, 2, 3, 4, 5, all the way to section 6. And different details on each section within the section of this particular report to educate the family, put them in the best situation possible. Now, we filter out a lot of what's in this report, and the report and the data itself is not the strategy. However, it is useful when it comes to strategizing, right? Putting together some type of a plan or a strategy. But the idea here is that we want to maximize aid potential where necessary. So this will be like the first page of the financial aid report. We go over certain terminology and things like that, definitions for some of us that are new to this whole FAFSA financial aid process. We're talking about SAI, cost of attendance, some of the acronyms, and kind of giving you a breakdown so you feel a little bit more comfortable understanding what you're reading, even not just in the report, but in general, as you go through the process, you realize there's so many different acronyms for everything related to finances and college. And then here's one example of the report. So this is pretty valuable information for a lot of families. And I suggest every family get this. Is more than just, what you would get if you visit, a website and get a net price calculator. I suggest every family do something like this. You see the pie on the right, you see the description and the paragraph information above. And this is really just kind of telling you graduation rates, what is your cost looking like in this particular situation. We're looking at right around $67,000 is the calculated expected family contribution. That's pretty high, right? That is the before. So this is the rough draft. Again, based on the information you gave us, based on the information this family gave me, this is what, if they completed the FAFSA today, this is what their outcome is going to be. And if college were to begin tomorrow, this before that you see is what they're going to be expected to pay. Now, you see in the green right there, the before and after, $67,000 SAI compared to a $25,000 SAI. That's almost a $40,000 aid eligibility difference. That's huge. For someone to have a $67,000 SAI, that means they have a pretty substantial income or savings, right? A net worth. So that is probably a more affluent family, but in based on some of the things that they have added, we identify certain mistakes, certain errors before they actually put it on the FAFSA and make it official. That can potentially bring their expected contribution, their SAI, down to $25,000. Even if they were somewhere in between that number, the 25 and the 67, is still a substantial savings, potentially. If you look down below, you see the savings, the total family contribution, TFC, total family contribution is going to be right around $29,000 from $67,000 down to $29,000. That's over $30,000 in savings a year. And at a four-year university, that's about $120,000 that they're saving in free money, just by eliminating some of the costly mistakes that they would have made on the FAFSA. They're doing the preparation before they complete the form. This is very important. Whether this is what you're using or you have your own resources, I encourage every family, every parent to do this, even if you already have a college student. Okay, so the pie chart on the right kind of shows you what to expect, right, from this university based on how much need that this university typically gives and what type of need they give. Very important information, very useful when it comes to submitting a financial aid appeal. So for most families that need to submit an appeal, those of us that have seniors or current college students, we typically start here. We want to make sure we know they're maximizing their aid eligibility, one, and if not, we need to do that. And then two, we need to understand at the school that their student is currently attending or the college in question, are we able to get more money, right? And I'll show you an example where we won't be able to get more money. I'll kind of give you that understanding. So what it does is it kind of helps set the right expectation for the family as they go through the appeals process. They're going to know, okay, well, this school, based on our situation, typically they don't give any more money. What we have is great. And if you got a little bit, you should be happy about it. And then in certain situations, you realize they gave us way less than what we actually should be receiving. We need to go after a little bit more money. So having this information, having this data is definitely useful when it comes to asking for more money and submitting a financial aid appeal. Again, I'll talk a little bit more about that in the upcoming slides. So with that being said, when we talk about mistakes, and you see at the bottom right here, it kind of reads in the bottom, if you can see that fine print, you may be eligible to increase your financial aid eligibility to $37,000 in the form, from $37,000 to $35,000 in the form of gift aid, and about $2,200 in the form of self-help. Self-help is going to be your work study, student loans, things like that, meaning you either have to earn it or pay it back. Gift aid is usually grants, scholarships, things like that that you don't have to repay. So, and then we have about 20 pages of, line by line, do this, don't do, just more information to kind of help the family understand how we're coming up with these projections and these opportunities, I would say. So now looking here, when you make a mistake on the financial aid, right? Financial aid forms, the true cost of making a mistake. If you miss out on a $6,000 a year financial aid, just $6,000 a year, that's about $30,000 over 5 years. $6,000 a year doesn't seem like that big of a deal to some people. It is, depending on who you ask. But $30,000 over the course of 5 years, and sometimes we think that's it, but no. As you see, if you read down below, that's not it. If you left that $30,000 in your investment account, and if you could earn, potentially 6%, and 6% seems reasonable to most people, I'm sure, over the course of 30 years, you should be able to average 6%. That costs you about $128,000, almost $100,000 more than what you overpaid, right? So you paid $30,000 more than you had to, but it actually cost you an additional $100,000 that you could have had for your retirement. So eliminating some of these losses, these I would say these negative, numbers is a huge deal when it comes to being able to do both, send your kid to college and have a healthy financial retirement or lifestyle. So a lot of people don't think about the opportunity costs that, certain mistakes have on your overall financial well-being. So, and this is a situation, another family at a state college here in California. And you see, this is Cal State Fullerton. But notice that they're very aid eligible on the far left. The before is 36,000. We're able to get that down to zero, right? $0. This particular family, small business owner, makes good money. But again, costly mistakes. Well, we fix those mistakes. We get them down to zero. But notice at the university that they are considering, they don't have a lot of money to give. They just don't. This is where it makes sense to make sure your student, if you're underclassmen, has a well-balanced list. You got some selective colleges, private universities, maybe some public, colleges. And then we use the data and we try to ask for more money strategically, negotiate, if you want to use that word, but we ask for money strategically. But at this particular college, the average need that they meet is about 1%. So no matter how much money this family, was able to demonstrate they needed, the college will only meet their need at 1%. And of that 1%, there's about 74% of the gift aid. 1%, but 74% of gift aid, that's really no help, right? So understanding this going in, when our students build their list, we want to make sure we have the right colleges, the right balance of colleges on that list. We want to have, this should not be a surprise to this family because, they have done the research and their due diligence going in. But, adding this school, compared to a few other schools that should be on the students list, that's where we have, we can start making some ground and finding some, pretty reasonable opportunities. But Some colleges are going to be much more generous because they have the funds. Some colleges aren't. When it comes to colleges in this situation that are not as generous, your student has to be one of the top students. They have to be that student that with the college is saying, you know what, we're willing to pay for the student. We'll give them everything that we can. But you're talking about top 5 to 10% of the incoming freshman class, right? So if your student is not in that situation, maybe top 20%, which is still very, very good. If they're choosing a college that just typically doesn't have the funds, is really nothing they can do. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. This information is helpful. So as we jump ahead, and along with the reports that I just showed you, just kind of giving you a little bit more. So when we talk about colleges, we usually give a side-by-side to a lot of our families. And again, this is at no cost to you. But if this is something that you want or interested in for your underclassmen, and this is also something that we suggest and heavily suggest to parents that are making students and families that are in that decision-making process when it comes to filing an appeal, submitting an appeal. It's always nice to have the data, in front of you, side by side, as you see in this particular screen. At the top right there, we're talking about colleges that are buyers versus sellers. Now, this is really important, again, when it comes to submitting a financial aid appeal. If a school is a buyer, that means that they're selling their education. They're selling the opportunity to attend their campus. If they are they're buying students, meaning they're giving you more merit money, more opportunity to attend. They are buying your student. Whereas if they're a seller, they are a little bit more reserved. Like, we don't really need you. If you take it or leave it, this is kind of what we have to offer, and this is how much it costs. Do you want it? Okay, yes, great. Not okay, cool. A seller, they have a little bit more control. They are, not really worried about, their yield rate or their acceptance rate, because they're going to fulfill their number and they're in a good situation. So knowing who's a seller, who's a buyer is always helpful when it comes to submitting a financial aid appeal, but it's also helpful well in advance before you even get to that point. Just again, so you have the proper expectations and a knowledge as you go through your process and you do your planning. So this is kind of some of the side-by-sides that we do. And then the bottom here, what's also really important to see is the 4-year graduation rate. Now, more and more students are not graduating in 4 years. And as you see here, University of Cincinnati, in this particular example, it's one of the cheaper colleges on this particular screen, but they also have one of the lower 4-year grad rates. So not every student is in the situation. Some students are graduating in 4 years, but this is about 3 students, maybe 4, 39%, about 4 students out of 10 are graduating in 4 years, right? So 40 students out of 100 are finishing in 4 years. The most expensive years of college are going to be that year 5, year 6, and beyond, because of the inflation and because of the raise, the spike in tuition, the cost of living. So if you don't want your student in college for 6 years, then that's another indicator that you might want to choose a more selective university where they can get in and get out and be on their way. There's no guarantees if they go to a more selective school that they're going to graduate in 4 years, but there's also no guarantee if they go to a less selective school, it's going to take them 6 years. You just want to follow the metrics, right? The odds. You want to put them in a situation where they're going to be likely to be more successful versus not, or in that type of environment, I would say. So, but these are the side-by-sides that we typically put together. We, add more colleges based on, major or financial need. We add colleges based on likely to give tuition discounts, scholarships. So, our families may have 5 or 6 colleges, but this list kind of gives them, a little bit more perspective and introduce them to certain colleges that they may not have heard of, that they may want to consider or do some research on based on certain parameters that are unique to the student, to the family's financial situation, and colleges based on best value, based on, a number of things. But we try to give them as much data as they and use this as a part of our planning to kind of put our families, in the best situation that they can possibly be in. So here you see in the red up there, there's if you can see the writing, it's basically saying schools with the highest, I would say, ability of getting financial aid. I can barely see that particular writing on my screen. My apologies. I know it's small for you. And then right here, you have another one, best value, that we're looking at. So if you want a better clearer picture of that, we'll get you the report if that's what you need. So anyhow, and then lastly here, we also include some state schools, some private schools beyond those particular side-by-side comparisons. But this is our comparison report where we're showing, what's out there, what are some of the, the potential. This is where we get our students to apply to additional colleges that they may or may not have considered. So,